All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk to you today. Nope, not working on my computer. All right. So I'm going to talk to you today about how to automate your React Native world with Fastlane. By the end of this talk, hopefully you should have enough information to start using Fastlane for your own project. If you're already using Fastlane and you're an expert at it, at least you'll learn one or two things. So a little bit about myself before we get started. My name is Philippe Trepanier. I'm a full-stack developer at Ozidia. Ozidia is a software development agency based in Montreal, Canada. You've already seen my colleague Adrien earlier today. He's French, I'm Canadian French. Doesn't really make a difference, but we like to say it. Our agency's been developing mobile applications for quite a while. Among the inconveniences that we've encountered, the most significant ones are often directly or indirectly related to application deployment. Just a little bit of background. So that's the wrong side. All right. Luckily for us, there's a solution that comes in the form of software called, you've probably guessed already, Fastlane. So just a little bit of background on Fastlane. It's developed mainly by Felix Kraus. You should check him out at Kraus on FX on Twitter. I did not write Fastlane. I just want to say that out loud. Fastlane was started 3 years ago and is written in Ruby. It's a tool chain that contains several very useful development tools. We'll see during this talk. It's not specific to React Native, though. I don't know if I'm breaking the React Native only rule here, but you can also use Fastlane for any iOS or Android application, provided that you develop on OS X. As of right now, it does not work on Windows or Linux, but hopefully, since you're here, you're using OS X. I'm messing up with my tools. OK. So Fastlane. Very simply, the Fastlane tools allow for more concise configuration and usage of the underlying mechanisms of mobile application deployment. We'll take a look at the most important tools and learn, especially when starting out, with Fastlane. For iOS, there's Match, Gym, Pilot, Snapshot, Deliver, and Precheck. For Android, we have Gradle, Supply, and Screengrab. So to get started, the Fastlane setup, provided you've already installed Fastlane on your computer, I'm not going to show it to you because it's quite boring. To set up Fastlane on your React Native project, you have to go into both the Android iOS folders and run the Fastlane init command. Sorry, I'm fucking up with the mic a bit. Follow the instructions that follow, and you will end up with a fast file within a Fastlane directory, like it's showed on the screen. So Fastlane for iOS. The first tool we're going to look at is Match. Instead of using separate code signing identities for every developer, Match is used to create a single identity and store it in a central place. If you've ever worked with iOS, you've probably noticed that everybody needs to create their own identity. When you use Match, a single identity is going to be used for your app. So what's going to happen is you're going to store your certificates in a private repository accessible by the entire team. Match also manages the certificates on the development machine, fetching the required ones whenever needed. What it looks like in practice is you're going to type in match init the first time you're going to use it. It's going to generate the certificates to the specified Git repository. Once that's done, you can just run Fastlane match, and we'll load the certificates that you need on your local machine, as well as the provisioning profile. So I skipped some of the most verbose information on this slide, but all you can see is in the term Screengrab, the required keys, certificates, and provisioning profile have been installed on my machine. So this diagram shows the end result. We have the distribution certificate, the development certificate, the App Store provisioning profile, and the development provisioning profile encrypted and stored on a Git repo that is accessible from all our development machines. All you need for a new developer to be able to build and deploy the applications is to have him enter the decryption password, and then he gets access. Before going on to the next tool, I want to take a second to show the Xcode UI way of building iOS applications. Just give you a base of reference in case you've never had to actually do it. So this is not the initial setup, it's just a regular deployment. Here you can see the InstaMeow application Xcode. Sadly, like I specified, it wasn't approved, but we'll live with it. So we started by cleaning out our app, which involves removing all the product files, as well as any object files or other intermediate files created during the build process. We do that by selecting the product tab, then the clean option. Alternatively, you can use Shift Command the K shortcut. Then we need to build an archive of our project by selecting the product tab, then archive. Also, there's no shortcut for this for some reason. So yeah, I don't know what happened at Xcode. But to upload the application to iTunes Connect, you then choose the Xcode tab, then the developer options, then application loader. You'll get a screen on the application loader asking to select whether you want to deliver your app or you want to create a new in-app purchase. We'll select the first option in this case. And you get a chance to review the app information to make sure you're deploying the correct application. And finally, the app gets pushed to iTunes Connect. Although the entire process looks fairly simple, you can imagine that doing this for every single deployment becomes quite tedious and frankly quite annoying. We'll see faster ways to do that. Gym is a tool used on iOS, on Fastlane with iOS to build and package iOS apps. I believe this is one of the cases where the commands showcase perfectly how simple the application actually is. You literally just have to run Fastlane Gym. Alternatively, the command line tool that Xcode gives you is that really nice two command that you need to remember by heart. So probably what's going to end up is you're going to have to write a bash file for it, and you're going to need to write a bash file for every single of your applications you want to deploy, which is, again, not nice. Fastlane saves you to do that by doing simply Fastlane Gym. If you require more control over what Gym does, you can pass options directly into the command line or add a configuration using Fastlane Gym init. The CLI shows clearly that you can simply just pass options to it, which is not usually what you want to do because you want to save the settings that you're using to build your application for every developer working on it. Assuming you're not the only one, then who cares? You can just search your history. The alternative is to use a Gym file, and you can just type Fastlane Gym in it. It's going to create a configuration, and then you have the chance to go and edit that configuration to set it up to whatever you want. Pilot is it's an interesting tool. It allows you to manage your application on Testflight. For those who don't know, Testflight is the Apple service to test applications before deploying them to the App Store. Among other things, it also lets you upload and distribute builds, add and remove testers, and retrieve information about testers and devices. It's quite the useful tool whenever you're before the production cycle. Although Pilot by itself is fairly reliable, there is one problem. It works by scraping Apple's websites. So if at some point it just breaks by itself, it can happen. So I would suggest having an alternative ready in case you don't want to get yelled at by the QA team because your application is not deploying. Like I mentioned previously, you can add and remove testers very easily using Pilot. The commands are simply Fastlane Pilot add, followed by the email address of the tester, or Fastlane Pilot remove. You can also view the information relevant to a specific tester by running Fastlane Pilot find instead. You'll see something like the picture on the right side of the screen. I'll show an example of uploading and distributing builds with Pilot a tiny bit later. Everyone follow me? Not fast? Okay. So Snapshot. Snapshot is the most time-saving tool available with Fastlane. It automatizes the generation of localized iOS screenshots for different device types and languages on the App Store. which means that it makes it really easy to take smart screenshots of your application. What I mean by smart screenshots is it's actually going to wait for the network request to be finished before taking the screenshots. So if you've ever had to take screenshots programmatically on your iOS device, it's a pain in the ass. If you do it manually, it's extremely long. With Snapshot, kind of fixes both of those problems. It also drastically reduces the amount of erroneous screen grabs you're going to get if you ever did it programmatically. In case you weren't convinced of using Snapshot just yet, since Xcode 9, Snapshot can run multiple simulators concurrently. The simulators will continue running even if you do other tasks, which means that, say, if you want to take 600 screenshots of your application, you can do it. It's going to do it extremely fast, and you can do other things at the same time. Precheck is an interesting tool. For some reason, it doesn't seem to be that well known among the Fastlane enthusiasts. But Precheck attempts to reduce the number of reasons Apple has to reject your builds for many avoidable reasons, such as metadata issues, including if you have swear words in your metadata, Apple is going to tell you that doesn't work. If you use other companies' trademarks, or if you mention an iOS bug, which we all do. So instead of having to read through your app details on iTunes Connect and try to find any potential issue, Precheck will simply read your metadata and tell you if there's anything that could be fixed. I do have to mention that although Precheck is pretty sweet, it does not guarantee that your application would get through app review successfully, as is shown with InstaMeow. Yeah, but that's life. Consider it another tool on top of your own diligence. So, the last tool for iOS, promise. Deliver. So Deliver is used at the end of the deployment process. It uploads screenshots, metadata, and binaries to iTunes Connect. You can also use Deliver to submit your app for App Store review. If you use it with Snapshot, it will automatically upload screenshots from Snapshot to iTunes Connect. A very helpful feature is the ability to generate an HTML preview of the fetch metadata before uploading the app metadata and screenshot to iTunes Connect. So instead of having to read through every single field that you entered, you can just generate a nice preview and you'll have everything available. You can also use it to upload a new IPA or PKG file to iTunes Connect without Xcode, because we don't want to use Xcode. Deliver will also automatically use Precheck to ensure your app has the highest chances of passing app review the first time it's submitted. So as you can see, Deliver is really at the core of the tools that you want to use on iOS with Fastlane. So we're done for iOS tools for now. Let's move on to Fastlane tools for Android. So Fastlane supplies a Gradle wrapper that makes the vast majority of Gradle functionalities available with Fastlane. If you've never used Gradle, you're new to mobile application development, Gradle is a build tool used to build Android application by managing dependencies and providing custom build logic. It supports the creation of multiple APKs for different devices types while reusing parts of the same code, which basically means that you can build Android devices for many devices using the same code. If you ever worked with, even if you've been using Android Studio, Android Studio runs Gradle in the background. When you're building your Android application, you are using Gradle. So the role of Gradle on Android is in many ways similar to that of Jim on iOS when working with Fastlane. However, Gradle does much more as registering dependencies for Fastlane tools, such as Screengrab and allowing easy testing on local devices. This is important because when we're building our Fastlane files, our fast files, we want to make sure that our iOS and Android builds look similar. Screengrab generates screenshots of your Android application for different device types and languages for Google Play. It's essentially the same thing as Screenshot. The main difference to note is that well, you've worked with Android. Almost every Android device is different, right? When you're generating your screenshots, you can also use them for QA. So say I have, well, on iPhone, it's pretty easy. I have, I don't know, like 10 or so different screen sizes. On Android, I have 100. If you want, you can generate 10,000 images, and you can have your QA team go through them. Obviously, that looks like a lot of work, but if you want to make sure that your application is perfect, it is a very helpful QA tool. So, Supply. Supply uploads metadata, screenshot binaries to Google Play. You can select tracks for builds and cherry-pick builds for production. You can use Supply to upload the app icon, promo graphics, screenshots for multiple languages, as well as retrieve and edit metadata. So your metadata will be stored with your application, making the versioning for the app that much more easier. Obviously, when you're working on an application, it's automatically going to be versioned. When you're working with metadata, the metadata is not versioned. It's directly stored on the Apple side. So here, we're actually going to store it locally, and then we're just going to re-upload it whenever we need. So if I'm editing the metadata locally, the other developer was going to have the same metadata when he deploys. So Supply accomplishes on Android the same task as Pilot and Deliver do on iOS. The one main advantage is only having to configure a single tool on Android and being able to cherry-pick build, go to prod easily, which is not something that you can do on iOS. So I don't know why this made me think of automation, but it looked like automation. We've seen tool that we can use from the Fastlane toolchain, but we still want everything to be automated, right? That's the whole point of this talk. So we don't want to manually have to use each tool, remember all the commands, and luckily for us, there's a solution that comes with Fastlane called lanes. Lanes are Fastlane release processes that are controlled in the fast file. So lanes execute actions. The tools that we've seen earlier are usable through actions, although there's many more actions that are available. I'm not going to go into them because it's going to take quite a while. But essentially, pretty much everything you could want to do with Fastlane is doable through actions. The actions types break down as testing, building, screenshot, project, code signing, etc. So building lanes. You can create as many lanes as you want in your fast file. On iOS, it's recommended to use beta as for Testflight, for your Testflight lane. So when I'm going to deploy my application to Testflight, I'm going to create a Testflight lane. When I want to deploy to the App Store, I'm going to create a release lane. Here's an example of what it looks like. The first screen is, actually both screens show the lanes for iOS. So you can see the beta. You can see the beta lane on the first screen, all the actions it's going to call. Say gym, pilot, you can see that match is being commented out because match does the downloads the certificates on your local machine. But then when gym is going to sign the application that's going to be built, it doesn't need to re-download them again. So we're only going to do it once. Everything you put in your lanes, you want to be something that you need to run every deployment. I'm quite lazy. I don't create lanes just for a single action. So instead, what we did is we just commented it out. If you need to, you can always set up lanes for local setup. If you don't want to be, I don't know, you want to install your pods dependencies for iOS every time, you can always add the CocoaPods action. You can also run bash scripts if you needed, but I do strongly suggest looking at the numerous available actions so as not to reinvent the wheels. We've had this problem before. Like there is literally like 100 different actions that you can take on Fastlane. Lanes are also a great spot to run automated tests. So say you already have a setup. You're maintaining an existing application and you don't want to delve into Fastlane completely. If you want, you can just cherry pick some tools to make your life easier. Like I've shown, you can just directly call a tool, or alternatively, you can create lanes, but say don't deploy if you're doing your own type of super cool deployment. Some of the, I haven't talked about Site. Site is an interesting tool because it runs behind the scenes on Match, but it allows for easier management of code signing on iOS. If you've ever done code signing manually, it's one of the biggest pain in developing iOS applications. So if you cannot use Match because for some reason you already say you have your own profiles, you can just use Site to manage them. Also, both Screenshot and Grab, the two tools I talked about earlier to take screenshots of your application, can be used independently from the rest of Fastlane. At the very least, they will simplify the generation of screenshots, and at the very best, they will help you do better QA on your applications. If there is one tool that I can suggest you use is Screenshot and Screengrab. So also, Precheck is a must-use in my opinion. Worst case scenario, if you're going to run Precheck, it's going to take about a minute to run, and it's going to tell you that your application is fine. Well, as far as it knows. And best case scenario, it's going to save you a day of waiting for an app review that's going to turn out negative, like we've all lived through before. So I have a short video showcasing the building, signing, and deployment of an iOS app to Testflight. It's sped up to about 2 minutes. So yeah, the entire process usually takes around 17 minutes. So obviously I sped it up quite a bit. The longest part in building an iOS application is the actual building. The code signing and deployment are extremely fast, especially with Fastlane. Yeah, this is usually a good moment. Take a coffee break too. It's about 17 minutes usually. So yeah, as you can see, the code signing has already been done. You have the building that's being done right now. A ton of C++ being compiled. One of the cool things about Fastlane is that it not only makes everything faster, but it brings everything in one place. There is, like the human element is always the big problem. When deploying something, Fastlane is going to remember everything you did last time and is going to do it again. If you do it manually, especially if you do it through Xcode, I can guarantee that you are going to forget something at some point. Okay, yeah. So when it finishes, what it's going to do is it's going to run pilot, deploy the build to the Testflight. And the entire thing is going to take, like I said, 17 minutes. Without Fastlane, this takes 14 minutes more. So you're saving about, 40% of your time, and you don't have to do it manually. So you can do that and go argue with a colleague about how terrible his code was, or whatever. And that's it, all done. So although Fastlane is pretty cool, there's still things that we cannot do. Even a fully fledged setup has some small inconveniences when deploying apps that sadly cannot be avoided. Among those are the registration on the Google Play Console, the Apple Developer iTunes Connect platforms. If you've ever tried to invite someone, I actually had this problem like 2 days ago. Someone tried to invite me to the Apple developer team, and it took, I'm not kidding, like 2 hours to figure out because it kept logging me into my other email address, and it's just a complete mess. The iOS app review is also the process where you submit your iOS application to Apple. Well, that you cannot go further. Fastlane can allow you to go faster than that. Sadly, you're going to have to wait about a day to see if you pass the requirements or not. So what I suggest is, this is all very theoretical knowledge. If you want to get a grip into Fastlane, you can test it out on our application InstaMeow. It's available on it's available open source on our Git repo, React Native offline first example. So yeah, try it out. If I can leave you with some things while working with Fastlane, make sure that you don't reinvent the wheel. If you're starting to write bash code, you're probably doing something wrong. If you can use all the tools mentioned, because for an X reason you're using your own build system or you have something special that you're doing, there's either a way to port it to Fastlane, or you can simply just remove the time-consuming tasks, say like code signing and screenshot from your deployment process by using Screenshot or Screengrab. Thank you very much.